Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the House Footy YouTube channel. I'm Jack Hudson, joined by AFL legend Warren Treasurer. And Treaders, today we're going to preview Port Adelaide and the GWS Giants on Saturday night. And nervous times.
Oh, mate. Hutto, I'm nervous. As we said, Saturday night, 7:40 Eastern. Surely, yeah, well, let's get to the serious stuff. Let's not worry about the Port Adelaide emblem and the banner and the supporting and life of commitment to a footy club that I'm frustrated and nervous with. But let's face it, last time both these teams played, the Giants, it was funny. They'd lost the Sydney Derby the week before. They'd won seven previously in a row. That's after the starting the season 2-5 or something ridiculous. Adam Kingsley's got them zinging, and anyone who saw St Kilda last week, wow, MCG, they look scary, scary, scary. But as we said last time was round 22, Port 136 to the Giants, 85. It's an absolute pumping. So the bookies, it's interesting here, $1.62 favourite Port. That's really ambitious, I think. Not that this is a betting program, but GWS is saying 230, which is, I'm not a betting person, but I was suggesting a two-horse race. It's a pretty good one if you look at the way the Giants played last week. The big question for me, Hutto, when we look at this is how many injured players are Port Adelaide going to be missing for this week's game? We know their defence was decimated, and in saying that, half of them played. Mackenzie came back from that ankle injury, has now hurt another ankle injury, came back onto the field. He'd be sore as anything, having to get on a flight. When you get on a flight, the thins your blood, makes the swelling worse. So I dare say he's pretty ginger this week in recovery. Aaliyah hurt his knee on a Thursday night at training, I heard. He looked inhibited on the weekend. Jonas pinged a hammy last week at training. Also heard a whisper that Riley Bonner may have pinged a hammy at training last week. That one hasn't got out yet. There's a bit of whisper on maybe there's more injuries than we thought. Dylan Williams pinged a hammy, was subbed out, or didn't finish the game. That's after Darcy Byrne-Jones was feeling tightness in his hamstring and was subbed out of the game for Travis Boak. And then it all went sort of AWOL. And we also know that Todd Marshall's been carrying a hip flexor. So you had eyes and ears at training the other day. How many of these guys are actually realistic, whether they're going to play or not?
Well, there hasn't been much circus around Aliir, which is weird considering he's probably the biggest name out of those lot. But even Dersma was a part of that group. He was walking laps with Todd Marshall. Trent McKenzie, I don't think he trained.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there's a lot of apprehension at Alberton, and you mentioned being at training. The mood was the furthest thing from a finals side that there could possibly be. It was just nerves, apprehension, and borderline concern, and maybe probably just a bit of conceding that this may be it, considering what is on the other side if they win.
And this is funny. Says me, I've put the acid on the club this year, and I stand by everything I've said, and I don't agree with some of the decisions they've made, but that's life. But the worrying bit for me in last week's performance up in Brisbane is that the one wood for Port is their stoppage to score stuff, but they conceded 13 goals from stoppages against Brisbane. Now, the game was going to be, if the game got into transition, I think it was going to be hard for Port because that's not their strength. Their stoppage stuff is their strength. But Brisbane beat it their strength, which is the stoppage stuff, kicking 13 goals, but also beat them in transition. The stats were relatively even. The concern for me is how they come up against the Giants in a similar task. As you say, that negativity around the place, that's probably, I'm assuming that's probably from injury more so than anything. I thought last week's game, Willem Drew was really good on Lachie Neale, but it just proves how good Brisbane were. McCluggage went off the ground for 10 minutes. Port kicked 3 goals in a row. He comes back on the ground. Lions kicked 3 goals in a row, and he's arguably best on ground. I thought Ryan Burton was really good on Charlie Cameron until the damn wall broke, and I thought Ollie Lord with his 4 goals was good. Rosie tried hard, but really, as we've sort of seen, if you can stop Rosie, you can stop Jason Horne-Francis, you can stop Butters, 3 genuine superstars on their own day, then you can beat Port, and that's exactly what Brisbane did. So this is an interesting bit. How many Port can take in with that question mark under him? For Marshall, that doesn't surprise me. He hasn't trained. He's carrying a hip injury. Byrne-Jones, tight hammy. Finlayson, who's really hasn't offered much up the last month, kicked a heap of goals the first part of the season as that third tall. Maybe he's the guy that has to go to defence. And when I say defence, he plays centre half back. He tries to play on someone. He doesn't get taken to the cage. Leave the deep work, should I say, whoever's going to be on that, whether it's a Toby Green or a Hogan, if they try and take him deep, you keep swapping over. But, the other bit is Piscini, Jake Piscini, who hasn't played an AFL game. He's been pretty good in the sample throughout the year, dropped off a little bit of late. Maybe they just have to give him an open go, because if you look at the Giants forward line with Riccardi, Toby Green, Hogan, they've got heaps of people bobbing up, which I think is a big, big concern for Port Adelaide.
Exactly. And who does Miles Bergman go to? Like, he has been so reliable. He took out Jeremy Cameron earlier this year. Like, who does he go to out of that group?
I think it has to be one of those guys that plays higher. And that's why the Finlayson bid is the option. I think Alia's certainly proved me wrong. Many years ago, I thought he was generally a high defender. He was an All-Australian, and he was a bit susceptible to fast ball movement playing out of the goal square. He's improved that area of his game very, very good. And he's probably Port's best one-on-one defender in terms of stats. I think up until last week, he was 21% loss ratio. The AFL average was 25%. And then the next lot of 30 and 40%. So Port is vulnerable in defence. They were vulnerable in defence. And this is where I hear a bit of the narrative, oh, yeah, we haven't got the defenders. Well, even their best teams haven't been able to stop consistently. And that's why Port's percentage was so poor, because when they got belted hard. When they won the close ones. So they're still conceding too many goals. And that's an area they're going to have to look at in the off-season, hence why they're going for Ratugolea. So I just don't know which way Port's going to go, to be honest. And I still think it comes back to midfield battle. Because when you got Lockie Ash, who's had 31 and 10 rebounds from half-back, Whitfield's had 31 and 7 inside 50s, Kelly's had 27 and kicked 2 goals, and they've had to put someone to him, and Tom Green's had 36 and 9 inside 50s. That's going to scare the crap out of anyone when you're coming up against them. And Ken Hinkle will be going, how are we going to stop them? A lot of teams are talking about how we stop Butters, Rosie. One thing they need to do is put Ollie Wines more in the centre square, because he's not a wingman. He's a one-position player. And he's a brilliant one-position player, which is an inside bull. Maybe they need to release a bit of the flamboyance in terms of play Horne-Francis more as a forward. But I look at the Giants stuff, heading into the finals, they had as you said, the second best scoring team profile, and they're the hardest to score against. And they're brilliant at ball movement. And that's exactly what Brisbane did. But this team's better again. So this is going to be a big challenge for Port, particularly at home. Yes, you look at last time, 50 points or roundabouts, 48 points last time. 48 points against the Lions loss. You're expecting to get a reaction. But as we said, the last game these guys played, it's about a 51-point win. So Port. So I think it's a totally different dynamic. And I think if Port can't get their control the footy, they're going to be exposed.
Absolutely. And last time the Giants were missing both Brent Daniels and Toby Bedford. So that's two of the best small forwards in the comp at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. 24 points last week against the Saints. A bloke who called Stephen Canelio didn't play with a poked in the eye. So he's expected to come back, and that's another superstar. That's not the Canelio of a couple of years ago that lost form. And it's certainly not quite yet the Canelio of about 5 years ago, when he was arguably the best two-way runner in the comp. But he's had a phenomenal year. And if you look at Canelio, Green, Whitfield, Kelly, Ash off half-back, if Port Brett come with a similar mindset to the weekend, it could be straight sets. I'm expecting a serious reaction, though, and they're going to know they're going to have to dominate the midfield, because they don't want to leave their defence exposed.
Another big weapon for the Giants, Kieran Briggs, has just continued to grow and grow, and he played last time that they met, and he towered up Sam Hayes pretty good, but now he's got Scott Lycett, who's probably just as physical as he is.
Yeah, and I think also, too, he's got experience on his side, and last week against McInerney, I was expecting if Lycett can curb his influence, that'll help Port and go a long way towards winning. Well, in terms of the hit-outs to advantage, at one stage it was 12-4 Lycett's way. So he was a lot more dominant, and it was unbelievable that Port's midfield struggled. So it just tells you where their intensity was missing. So Briggs is a decent find. He's a good player, and as you said last time, he kept growing and growing. I think he grew inches in that game. So he's a dominant player. He's fresh off wiping Rowan Marshall from the MCG, and that's no mean feat, considering he was probably one of two players who are expected to be All-Australian, and he didn't quite get there. So the other challenge too for Port is if Dixon does come back, and I worry how many unfit players, as I said before, that they're going to play. Dixon's probably likely going to get Sam Taylor.
Yep.
Pound for pound, I think the best, when you say the best, there's 4 or 5 who could be deemed the best. But yeah, he's the difference between the Giants conceding 20 more points a game or not. He's been phenomenal.
100%. And like with the forward structure, like Marshall comes out, how do you reckon a forward line of Dixon and Ollie Lord would go? Like that's two animals.
Well, I think it'd work okay. I just can't have, when I say I can't have Dixon. I'm massive on key forwards being on the move. What does a defender want you to do? He wants you to stand next to you. Doesn't want you to move. It makes it easy. They'll wrestle, bring the ball to ground. The likelihood is you get pushed out the way and marking. At best, it's probably 25, 30% if you're having a good day. So that says to me, anywhere between 75 and say 70% of the time, it's either nullified or you're winning and it's hitting the deck. So I think Ollie Lord, particularly last week, pleased me in the way he goes about his game. He's not a huge possession winner, but what he does do is launch after the ball. He does get the ball on the ground. His first two goals were actually from the ground. And he got confidence from that. So I think you're going to have to be on the move, particularly up against Sam Taylor and the like defenders, Himmelberg, if he's down there. Yeah, no one wants to sit and wrestle a defender. It's great if you're playing a minnow team who's struggling, but in big games, it's almost impossible to win those, because there's pressure on the kick. The calibre of players you're playing against are a lot better, both in the midfield and all around the ground. So I think from Port's perspective, they're going to have to be a little bit unpredictable. And you go back to a team in 2017 where no one rated until they got to the finals and deep in the finals, and that was Richmond. Maybe Ken Hinkley looks at a mosquito fleet. Whether Dixon comes up or not, maybe it's just Lord, or maybe it's just Dixon, or maybe it's one or two and Dixon can relieve in the ruck if Finlayson's, for example, in defence. But then you have a Rioli. You might look at bringing Fantasia in with good sample form or even as a sub. I think Francis Evans has to play. You rest Jason Horne-Francis down there, all of a sudden you've got 4 or 5 smalls and one big bloke. That's what the Tigers did with Jack Riewoldt to great success in 2017. Maybe that's a bit of a look. Play one big fella or two and play the mosquito feet, both with pressure and being able to make it up as they go.
Well, Port won the tackles inside 50 quite considerably last week, and that's been a positive this year that we've seen like beasts like Power Pepper, like McEntee, even though he's probably been a bit out of form. These players have applied the pressure, but how does Fantasia's got to come back in at some point or be considered, because he wasn't even an emergency last week despite his good form? Seems a bit ridiculous that a player of his quality, his X factor, who did what he did in the 2021 final series, he should be playing.
Well, he should be playing, but the problem is, how do you rely on his body? If we're completely honest, every time he's got continuity, he's pinged something. So is it a last gasp saloon? Yeah, it probably is, isn't it? Right now for Port, if they don't get it done, it's all over. Surprisingly, you get an email from the AFL every week who's coming out with their milestone matches. Well, he's sat on 99 games forever, so he'll play his 100th if he runs out. I like the thought that maybe you could put him as a sub. He can run, he can accumulate, he makes good decisions. He's played really good SANFL form recently. His last game would have been 2 weeks ago in the Magpies. He kicked 3 first half goals, I think it was, and then was sort of curbed his influence. But I'd love to see an Evans, those types of players. Talk about where the boat goes on right now. There's an interesting discussion. His form, mate, what greater opportunity is if you're going to rock him and publicly and question whether he's going to play on and then put him back onto a wing or around the midfield and see if he can get the job done for you, albeit 34 or 35 years of age. So I think the great unknown is for Port. What do? It won't be a 51-point win like last time. No. I think the Giants, to be honest, on form probably should be the favourite. But the Port boy in me says, fingers crossed we can fall over the line. I don't care what it is by.
Yeah, I'm with you. Plus a straight six exit, we don't really want to deal with that. And the pressure would naturally come. But another one I wanted to ask you about, because debutants in finals, they're not too common. Hugh Jackson's another one who's been in very good form at SANFL level. Travelling emergency last week. What do you think?
Oh, where are you going to play him?
Does he go onto one of those wings and takes Wines' spot when he goes onto a wing? What does he do?
Well, you got to drop someone out then. So you go, who are you going to take out? At the moment, probably the most likely out's McKenzie potentially, defender. Burne-Jones, tight hammy, small forward. Well, that would be the Fantasia. Or I've just had a blank, small forward who can't consistently stay in the team. Dylan Williams is the halfback. So, Francis Evans, that was. So I just don't think he fits in. The other name we keep forgetting is Mead. I think Mead is too good for the SANFL. I know he's not playing anymore. Maybe if you need a ball winner, put him in. So I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to win enough football. They're coming up against, as I said, a star-studded midfield, and Port's got to find a way to win enough footy on their home crowd. The home crowd will get behind them. But deep down, It's got to be a game of territory. Win the footy, pin it in the front half, and don't get caught in a transition game because that's where the Giants want to play you at.
And there's still plenty of tickets available. I was checking Ticket Deck earlier. The top tiers are still there's still plenty of seats, so do get along, Port fans. But final prediction, Treaders. What does your head say more than your heart?
Oh, my head says probably the Giants could win.
Yeah.
The Giants' best is, I think, better than Port right now. But I'm going to go with Port. You don't jump off when things get hard. 10 points, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I'll back you. I'll go Port by under a goal.
All right, you're right, mate. Fingers crossed. Come on the power. But, geez, the Giants, they're good to watch when they're in first gear. And I'll be there. Hopefully they're not quite in fourth gear or fifth gear or sixth gear. Maybe just utter in first or second, chucking along the freeway would be nice.
Easy, mate. Well, thanks for joining us on the House of Footy YouTube channel. Subscribe and like, and have a look at the website, houseoffooty.com.au. We'll see you next time.